Hey, Church IT Network, Jeff Reed here, and I'm excited to share this video with you. I wanted to speak with you in person in this at the conference, and if you hadn't heard, Church IT Network, I did show up. I was there. It was the worst travel experience of my life. I was delayed a number of times, a number of cities, had to reschedule a number of things. And long story short, actually, I showed up finally at the conference maybe 20 minutes into when I was actually supposed to share this talk on missional imagination, asynchronous communities, and digital church. And so Jason Morris, JMO, actually had the great idea. Hey, Jeff, since you can't do the talk in person, why don't you just record the video and email the link out to everybody who signed up? I was excited, like almost 50 people, 50-some people signed up to be at this conference. It was one of the higher ones that we had for the online track. And listen, Jason is incredible clarity when needed. And so that was exactly the right thing to say, and it's exactly what we're going to do. And so I'm going to do this talk right now online for you, talking about missional imagination, asynchronous communities, and digital church. And hopefully video this even sticks with y'all. Feel free to share this video among your team and people. This is actually cool. You get to take the conference to your leadership, to your volunteers, to the people you work with at your churches. And definitely love what CITN is doing. Looking forward to what's coming up next for the organization. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jeff Reed. Like I said, I work for a bunch of different organizations, and it's ridiculous the opportunities that we have. Now, listen, a lot of people, a lot of churches want to go back to the building. That's nice. Just check out some of the organizations right here that are leaning into digital ministry, into digital church. And we're not just talking broadcasting church services, as you'll find out very quickly here. Hey, there's a QR code on the screen. Feel free to grab that, zap that, and you can get my phone number off of that and other contact information with that. By the way, let's back up. I've got a QR code on this. If you want the slide deck, all the links, everything with that, you can grab that QR code. Let me push this button. Oh my gosh, look, the QR code's bigger. And so feel free to grab that, or you can go to the URL go.theChurch.digital/CITN-async there. So I'll give you a couple seconds more. Go.theChurch.digital/CITN async. You know what the great thing is? You could pause the video if you didn't get it and get it. So let's get back into the show here. Like this will be fun. Technology is a great thing. By the way, I founded an organization, theChurch.digital, 3 or 4 years ago, pre-COVID, championing the idea of church online and digital discipleship. That grew into Digital Church Network, the logo next to it, where we champion digital expressions of church, metaverse expressions of church, churches without buildings. By the way, I do a lot of work with Leadership Network. Let's go ahead and throw that up there. Metaverse Church next. I'm director of Metaverse Church, and so do live shows and content centered around metaverse and what church looks like in the metaverse. We're talking virtual reality, of course. As a matter of fact, just today, when I'm doing this recording, the Today Show featured Jason Poling, one of the speakers at CITN, and did the Today Show. NBC News did a story on Cornerstone Yuba City, a small church in Northern California, and Cornerstone VR. We'll get into them probably here in a little bit. But there's all sorts of content there at metaversechurchnext.com. And of course, like I said, Digital Church Network. We've created an online community, 700 people last I checked, from around the world that are interested in innovation and the church, digital discipleship, digital church planting, metaverse. Oh my gosh, when you really dig into some of the blockchain and crypto stuff that we're talking about, and DAOs and NFTs, and how this is going to revolutionize what the church of tomorrow looks like, and maybe is even starting to bang on the door of what the church of today looks like. It's crazy stuff. So definitely excited about what's happening out of Digital Church Network. And I would invite you to join that community right now. Go to digitalchurch.network/joinfam to create it's a free account. digitalchurch.network/joinfam. Hey, listen, I wish I could have asked this question to you in person. What's your story? We love to hear what the stories are of the people that are doing digital ministry. So many people have pivoted into digital ministry as a result of COVID, and that's a point of excitement because we're seeing that God is doing something in your life, drawing attention to what God is doing in the lives of others digitally. And so, man, listen, I'm going to tell you my cell phone right now, 484 324-8724. I want you to text me what your story is. Go ahead and do it. Blow up my phone. It's cool. Text me. Don't pick up the phone and call me, animals. Nobody talks in these devices. They all type. Use your thumbs. 484-324-8724. Tell me what your story is. And then you can answer me this question. Is a digital church a church with no physical footprint? Is that a biblical expression of a church? Now, it's interesting. When I ask this question, and I ask this question all the time, I will get 60% of the people right off the bat without any other commentary. 60% of people will think I'm nuts. No, Jeff, a church is not without a building is not a biblical expression of church. They'll say something about Hebrews, the don't abandon the gathering, blah blah blah. And so right off the bat, 60% think I'm crazy. By the way, it's a higher percentage if it's senior church leaders. Now, 20%, actually, Jeff, that's not a bad idea. Actually, Jeff, I've been thinking about doing something like that. Now, what's interesting is those people, those are not your senior church leaders that are saying that. That's more like a bivocational volunteer, a low-level staff person, maybe somebody that isn't motivated by the rent bill on the buildings and paying the lease, the mortgage. And by the way, 20%, the other 20% are like, hey, you know what? It's a great question. Let me answer it at the end of the session. So where do you fit in there? Are you like you're crazy, which is awesome. If you're like, hey, that's not a bad idea, which is awesome. And if it's wait and see, that's cool too. We'll go down that road. Hey, listen, for this talk, I do want to be a little more specific on language. And so you're going to hear some of this here. When I say church online, what I specifically mean is broadcasting church services in online environments. CHOP, Church Online Platform, is a great example of that. It's the physical service that's being broadcast through digital spaces in the CHOP and the social media, Facebook, broadcasting something into Zoom if it's a camera in the back. Like it's just the broadcasting of that. Altar Live's a great example, once again, of another platform that does this. Now, digital discipleship is another component of this. So if church online is the broadcasting of the Sunday morning service, digital discipleship is everything that happens beyond Sunday morning, creating disciples utilizing digital tools. We also are going to talk about digital church operating primarily without a building, utilizing Web 2 tools. We're talking social media, we're talking Zoom, we're talking mobile app, utilizing some of the Web 2 technology, the social media aspects of that. And then we're also going to be talking about metaverse churches. These are churches that are operating primarily without a building, but not utilizing Web 2. They're utilizing Web 3 tools. We're talking virtual reality, augmented reality, blockchain, crypto, some of those tools into the metaverse. And so you're going to hear me use these words a lot: church online, digital discipleship, digital church, and metaverse church. Hopefully, this gives you an overarching view as we're going through here. But really, when we get into digital church, we want to set a standard for what the ministry looks like. And for me, I'm actually pulling this from Saddleback, Jay Cranda. I think this was actually before Jay Cranda was Saddleback, but the idea is online to offline. Jay does talk about this a lot. The gospel that we learn in our online world has to affect our offline relationships. Otherwise, we're creating consumers. So I've got my trusty phone here. If I'm listening to a podcast, if I'm watching a church stream, if I'm watching a church online service, in order to be online to offline, the standard that we should be holding our broadcasts, our church sermons, our churches digitally, is that the content that we're ingesting needs to affect not our online world only, but also our offline world. And you can arguably take this from the Bible. I'm going to paraphrase here, James 1:22. Do not merely listen to the word online and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says in the real world, in the physical world. So the challenge is not just to ingest content, and that's the danger of church online, of broadcasting these church services, is does it turn us into consumers, where we're sitting on the couch, where we're disconnected, where we're isolated, where we're not engaging with people, where we're not dialoguing with people? How can we do this where the content, where our services, where our discipleship is not just in a content level in the physical, but where the Spirit is moving through us at a more aggressive point physically? It's moving from digital, from metaverse to physical. And I tell you what, let's draw some analogies here. We're going to talk about Billy Graham. Bet you didn't think we were going to hear Billy in this talk. Billy Graham, 1995. You can zap the QR code there for more examples and more detail on this. But Billy Graham preached one sermon. It was bounced off of 30 plus satellites. It's translated in real time into multiple languages. His one sermon, preached in 1995 on global missions, ironically, was heard around the world by an estimated 1 billion, that's with a B, 1 billion people in 1995. Literally 20% of the world's population heard Billy preach this message. 25 years ago, Billy Graham, a huge technologist, really innovator, underspoken in that area, but huge. 25 years ago, Billy Graham figured out how to do reach. One-way communication. Billy, 1995, was preaching a sermon that connected with over 1 billion people around the planet. Now, what's ironic with that, 25 years later, Seth Godin, one of the top marketing guys in the country, if not the planet, thought innovative leader. Google Seth Godin, all sorts of books if you've not read them. Incredible stuff. Seth Godin, somebody asked Seth on his Akimbo podcast, ironically, the guy lived in Turkey. Hey, Seth, how do I get my message? How do I get my message heard around the world? And Seth has this to say: 1 billion people don't care about anything you have to say. You need to think smaller. Essentially, Seth's solution to getting your message heard around the world in 2020 is to tell a smaller number of people. Tell the smallest group of people possible. Get them to own that material and then get them to tell someone else. See, Billy Graham figured out the reach. In 1995, you could get 1 billion people to agree on something. 25 years later, 2020, you're never going to get 1 billion people to agree on anything. And so what we need to do, and actually what Seth Godin, a more Jewish, not a Christian at all, basically describes how Jesus started the church a couple thousand years ago, where he started with the smallest group of people possible. He started with 12 disciples and a core team of roughly 72 people. He told them an idea, he got them to own it, and he got them to tell someone else. It's beautiful here as we're looking at this. And once again, we see this throughout Scripture. You can zap this QR code. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. But Jesus developed in John 6 a reach and engagement strategy. This is one of the feedings of the thousands. Long story short, Jesus had a crowd following him because he was meeting physical needs. He was doing healings. He was doing signs and wonders and all of that sort of stuff. But what happened as a result of this is that Jesus had this crowd. And guess what? The crowd was hungry. It was late at night, and it got to the place where Jesus needed to feed these people. So he did one of the feedings of the thousands. You can get into Scripture and dig into it. Jesus, later that night, went to bed. Disciples went to bed. Everybody went to sleep. Next morning, Jesus and disciples take off, go somewhere else. The crowd wakes up. Hey, I want my physical needs met. Where's brunch? And they go follow Jesus. They go find Jesus to get, I don't know, the omelet and whatever you drink in the morning, coffee. What happened, though, Jesus wasn't doing physical needs anymore. Jesus wasn't about getting more people to follow him. He actually started asking questions. He started dialoguing. He started engaging the people. And what happened, he would say things like, eat my flesh, drink my blood. And as a result of the engaging, the following, the crowd that Jesus had developed started to go away. Even to the point that Scripture says that some of his disciples turned their back and no longer followed him. John 6:66 there. See, Jesus had offended the crowd. But what was left was that core of 72 I mentioned earlier, and the core discipleship team that would help elevate his message forward. You see, we need the reach. We need the reach, but it's not about the reach in one-way communications. When we're doing digital ministry, it's about that two-way conversations. It's about the dialogue. Now, I'm gonna stretch you a little bit here because I want to challenge us as churches. I want to challenge us to think different from here on. And let's try something different in this conversation. When I say doing something different, here's what I'm describing. What we're seeing in digital churches right now, churches that are operating in digital space, churches that are operating without a physical building, metaverse churches that are operating in virtual reality without a physical building or are engaging in these unique environments like virtual reality. We're seeing that ministry done in these digital and metaverse spaces are reaching a different type of person in a different environment through discipleship that looks differently, and we're empowering a different type of leader to do it. So truly, some of the ministry that we're talking about by digital, it's in metaverse, it's not challenging what's happening in the physical building. Very few people are saying to me, hey, you know what, Jeff? We've seen 80% of people come from physical buildings to go to church in virtual reality. I I have talked to dozens of metaverse pastors. I've not heard that phrase once. You know what I hear? The people that are coming to our virtual reality church are 80% agnostics and atheists. These are people that have not been in a church building in a decade. They are de-churched. They're people that have been burned by the bride of Christ, so much so they can't even go in a physical building. And the first step back to the bride of Christ is through a virtual reality headset. So to do ministry in digital and metaverse spaces, to do not only reach but engagement, we are finding that to do that effectively, when we do it effectively, we're reaching a different type of person. Let's unpack some of this. I want to share this. This is one of my favorite stories. This is, oh, that's really small. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut to it so you guys can see it. Hey, this is a story from Majestic Purple Buffalo through a church that's called Lux Digital Church. This is a gamer church that meets on Twitch and on Discord. And this is what Majestic Purple Buffalo says. Hey, Pastor, I just wanted to reach out quickly to say something that was on my mind. Last night's service was the first time I've been to church in about 10 years. Religion was shoved down my throat from an early age, and it really just turned me off to it all. But right now, I'm at the lowest point of my life, and I've been searching desperately for something to believe in, some sort of sign that everything will work out and there's a plan. Let me pause right there. When he says he's at the lowest point of his life, what he's describing is that his newly founded wife, newly married wife, cheated on him with his best friend. Spiritually seeking, dude's got a Bible, dude's got satanic verses, dude's got a Quran on his bookshelf. He is exploring all sorts of areas. He's not been in a physical building, church building, in 10 years because of what happened to him and the experience. But for him, let me get back into it where you can see this. And while I don't know for sure if religion will end up being the path that I take, I still find incredible value in the teachings, the lessons, and the overall message that you bring to service. I plan to attend the Lux service whenever I'm possible because I have the feeling that this is where I'm supposed to be. And then he goes off to talk about other things that he's involved ministry-wise within the Lux Digital Church. I think what's important here, a couple things, is that we're recognizing that, first off, this guy's not coming to a church building. This digital gamer church called Lux, led by Mark Lutz, is reaching a different type of person. The methods of discipleship through Discord, onboarding through gamer podcasts, like the way that this church is operating, is something that's completely different. And the target audience isn't to steal away from the church. It's actually to reach a different type of person. By the way, 4 days after this was written, my friend here, Majestic Purple Buffalo, accepted Christ. And so now, as a result of a digital church that's operating, reaching gamers, there's another guy who's going to heaven as a result of the ministry of what's happening within that digital church. By the way, digital churches like this are not rare anymore. There's actually more and more churches that are starting to operate in digital space without those physical footprint buildings. I was speaking about Lux Digital Church just a second ago. I'd also throw into the equation Mono Church. Mono Church is actually a microsite church that utilizes globally, where they've got campuses all over the location, all over the country, and even some internationally. But they utilize social media and digital assets to stay connected. The centralization of their decentralized movement is digital. We've got Hearts Like His, which is it's a Facebook church that's reaching de-churched people. It's interesting. They actually don't use the word church in Hearts Like His because there's so many de-churched and there's so many people that have been burned, not by Christ, but by the physical building, by the organizational church, that they actually take the name, Hearts Like His takes the name church out of its title so as to be more effective to reach people that have been burned by Christ. There's Love Clan, which is a very organic movement. Sorry, there's Love Clan, which is a very organic movement of a streamer, Jade Earhart, who streams online and disciples hundreds, thousands of people through Twitch streaming and through a Discord. He's conversation. He sits down and talks with hundreds of people at a time. Not a sermon, not worship, not what you would consider the normal ecclesiology of church. He does something different. And as a result, he's reaching a different type of person. Dude's actually incredibly effective in Japan, in Asia. He was just telling me the other day he's working on a technical system that will translate his streams in real time into different languages as he wants to start to relationally connect with more people in some of those Asian areas as well. Then there's barbecue church. Talk about something different. My friend here has got a love of barbecue, and as a result of what he's doing in barbecue, hey, you know what? I've got the influence I have in barbecue. I want to point that to Jesus. I'm going to start barbecue church, barbecue Assembly of God. Honest to God, it's a real thing. You can Google it, look it up. This is my favorite example of a digital church. Displaced Nigerian refugees. Now, this one does not exist yet. I've got a friend that's working on it. But his heart, he is a first-generation Nigerian refugee that's displaced. He's no longer in Nigeria. And he wants to utilize digital to connect with displaced Nigerian refugees as they're scattered literally around the planet and be church for them digitally, connecting with people, engaging with people, and pointing those people to Jesus. So what I hope you're seeing here are some unique examples of digital churches. By the way, metaverse churches, I didn't cover too much in this slide, but there's a lot of opportunities to do metaverse, virtual reality, etc. as well. And the challenge of all these digital and of these metaverse churches is to develop a biblically stable ecclesiology, the biblical functions of what a church is. So we're looking at Church Circle here. This is Acts 2, 36 to 47. And the question is, this is, if you look at what most people would say, what does the church actually do? They would pull something maybe from Acts 2, maybe Acts 8, Acts 16, and start to unpack, okay, this is what the early church, this is what the church of Acts did. And so here's the standard that we're applying on us, just even from Acts 2 here. We're looking at baptism, at prayer, at making disciples, love, worship, singing praises, Lord's Supper, communion. We're generous, we're giving. There's teaching, there's leadership, there's devotion, there's repenting, there's believing. You know, this is just a little bit that comes out of that Acts 2 passage. As we look at this, can we do this digitally without a physical building? I think you can. You know, maybe it takes a little imagination. Let's be honest. Baptism in virtual reality. I'm baptizing an avatar. That's probably the most controversial thing you're going to hear me say in this talk. But guess what? I think it works. I think you can do it. And I think we, the church, we have an opportunity to maybe reimagine what some of this ecclesiology is with paying respect to it. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I don't want to change that. But what I'm suggesting is that maybe that Lord's Supper, maybe that communion done differently can help us connect church to a different person. Maybe teaching doesn't have to look like the 45, 50-minute sermon that we're used to doing. Maybe we can lead in a different way digitally and empower a different type of leader than we do physically. And so a lot of this, worship tends to be very musical in physical space, but if we do things digitally, well, we can open up a whole other world of opportunities for worship. Spoken word, testimonies, scripture reading. We're not limited to four to the floor, heavy rock songs walking into every teaching. There's ways to be much more rich, much more expressive with some of our work, much more heartfelt with some of our worship. Now, I'm not slamming the building. The building serves a purpose. But what I'm saying is the building isn't the end all. Maybe we need to even reimagine what some of this looks like biblically and change the way that it looks. All right, hey, you know, I'm going to ask another hard question here. You can text me. Text me 484-324-8724. I'm curious. Would love your take. Is it better to have a 1,000,000-person church, or is it better to have 100,000 churches of 10? You know, probably the biggest church right now, at least in America, is Life Church, so maybe around 100,000. Korea actually may have some larger. I'm actually going to be in a conversation with Hillsong. I'm actually curious what their numbers are physically and online. But, you know, is it better to have 1,000,000 person to grow an organ? What can a 1,000,000-person church do that 100,000 churches of 10 cannot. And what can 100,000 churches of 10 do that a million cannot? You see, it's interesting. Pre-COVID, I think the church in general was driven towards that million-person number. Now, that may be too big. I don't mean that specific. But they were trying to grow as big as possible. And what I would challenge you all coming out of COVID is that there's an opportunity not to think big, but to think small. Only 8% of people in America attend a church over 1,000 people. Interestingly, Brady Shearer just published a video going back to, hey, you know what? If you're a small church, maybe you shouldn't be broadcasting your church services online. And to be honest, I agree with him because the strength in small is relational. And really, the strength in digital is relational. Remember Seth Godin, the Jewish guy. The goal is not to tell the biggest amount of people possible. You're never going to get a big amount of people to agree on anything. Instead, tell small groups of people. Get them to own it, get them to understand it, get them to tell someone else. You see, the big thing that small does, that big does not, is this right here, contextualization. I have the freedom to contextualize a message, an idea, based on what's happening in the space, who my audience is, and what I'm trying and who I'm trying to reach. Let's take my friend Majestic Purple Buffalo. Dude's a gamer. He got connected to a church through gaming. It was a shared experience that allowed an opportunity to him to meet some God-loving gamers. And as a result of it, he found Jesus through those contextualized relationships. That's the opportunity that we have, is not to try to treat a million people the exact same way, but we have the opportunity to treat individuals like the individuals that they are. Speak to them in contextualized environments, build relationships in those contextualizations, and then release them on purpose to tell someone else. This is where this idea of missional imagination comes in. Because like my friend Mark Lutz, who launched Lux Digital Church, we have the opportunity, church, pastor, leader watching this video, we have the opportunity to do something different. We have the opportunity to innovate here. And what's interesting, innovation, imagination, these are biblical words. We often lose sight of this. Let's look at the Ephesians 3 here. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. The interesting thing here is what we're learning from the scripture is that God not only wants us to imagine, but he is going to work through us beyond what we can imagine. I'm going to be honest. In past church experiences, I have used the phrase, church is where dreams go to die. Because the dreams that I had in my context as a staff person did not align with the leadership of what the church was doing. And as good as I was executing their vision, the church was not interested in my vision. Now, what's interesting is that biblical, I think we're seeing here, and we're going to start to talk about more opportunities where maybe it's not a centralized vision that we should be following, but maybe there's opportunities for us to decentralize that, to empower even volunteers to be more on mission, following their imagination, realizing that those people are going to be able to reach a different type of person than what the building is reaching. Once again, the building's not bad, but the building is decreasing over the past 25 years in its effectiveness. And it's clamoring and crying for people to come back to the building that's going to get the people back. We need to do something different. Well, here, let's unpack some of this. All of our content, the stuff that we're creating, it has to lead to community. So our online services, in order for online to offline, what we're finding is that it has to lead towards a community. Digitally, understand this, and I can give you countless stories. People find community before they find Christ. This is different than physical space. Physical, you get somebody raise their hand, you can't see. Hey, I'm raising my hand. At the end of the service, the invitation song, I'm accepting Christ. Somebody come give me a card. Somebody hug me. Somebody ask me to come forward. talk to me, pray with me, maybe give me a Bible on the way out, and then, hey, I accepted Christ. I have no idea what's next, what discipleship looks like, what follow up. That's whatever your church is doing. But I've at least done fire insurance where I'm accepting Christ in physical space. Digitally, some of that spiritual emotionalism doesn't carry. Now that doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it looks different. By the way, like some of the stories that I could tell, like my friend here, Majestic Purple, he was involved with the church for several months before he got to that level of relational equity, that level of trust, that it was restored to him, where he could find Christ in the midst and through the difficulties and the pain that he had. I can tell you other stories from metaverse where Satanists have accepted Christ in virtual reality, and that conversation actually was like 8 months, 8 to 10 months of dialoguing, not with one person but with multiple people. And so it's very important when we're onboarding people, when we're connecting with people, if we want that to be a lasting relationship, if we want them to see Jesus in us, it's not as important for us to throw that seed recklessly on the thorny bush. Instead, it's important for us to maybe till the soil a little bit, to build that relationship, to share some experiences that will help them find Christ. And really, what we've been finding successful in these online communities gets to this deal of asynchronous communities. Now, I've talked with church leaders about the phrase asynchronous communities, async, and I'm actually surprised how few people really understand what this is. Asynchronous communities, I'm talking Facebook group, I'm talking Discord, I'm talking Slack, maybe WhatsApp is a more familiar async community. Mighty Networks is actually the one that I use through Digital Church Network. But it's an online community that is not social media driven, where people are posting their moods or where they are, or pictures of their food. But instead, I guess it could be food. But maybe for barbecue churches, it definitely is going to be food. But really, it's more about sharing and collaborating within a community, asking questions and dialoguing. Asynchronous communities is where Jesus is going to say, eat my flesh, drink my blood. And everybody is going to freak out processing what exactly that means. Social media, if you do that on Facebook or on Twitter, Jesus gets flamed. If you do that in an async community, there's a little more trust with the community. And so you're going to wrestle with that. What does he actually mean? What is he saying? What am I not understanding? How does this apply to me? What do I need to do? Because there's more trust within the asynchronous community. And so what we're actually seeing is a lot of these digital churches and metaverse churches are running their discipleship systems within this asynchronous community. By the way, if your content isn't aimed towards a community, considering partnering with somebody. It's interesting. Just recently, actually, this is the first mega church that I know that is doing this. Seacoast is running a white labeled, decentralized, asynchronous community that they're trying to attach content creators and church services and things to. It's not even labeled Seacoast. They're not broadcasting it in that way. Instead, it's an opportunity that if you really aren't equipped for digital discipleship, maybe work with somebody that is interested in adding that digital discipleship. Just an idea. Well, hey, let me do this. Let me give you a simple approach. Maybe this will make sense for you. A simple digital church funnel. We've got the content. That's the front door. Now, that may be your church service. And then that church service, I would suggest to you, before you lead people to Jesus, almost it needs to lead to digital community. Because digital community is going to be the place where you build trust. Digital community is where there's going to be a stickiness. And so realizing, okay, if people find Jesus before the community, that's great. Through the Jesus conversation, get them into the community. But if people are not receptive of the Jesus term yet, invite them to the community, and then eventually we'll get them into Jesus, and we'll get them into the church overall. And so that's kind of the funnel and the process of how we're seeing digital and metaverse churches look. Now, what I want to do here is I want to share with you a very aggressive strategy, digital church strategy. Every church, physical church that's watching this, I'm suggesting to you, whether you're a 20,000 person church, whether you're a 2,000 person church, maybe you're a 200 person church, I am suggesting that at some level you operate this way. Actually, I can tell you there are 200 person churches that are operating this way. First off, it's very important to develop that asynchronous community. And it's important for you to do the digital discipleship within that community. Why is it so important to do digital discipleship in an asynchronous community? Scalability. Because I have the ability to do a lot of really interesting things if my discipleship process is digital. I don't have to fall within one model where the discipleship is physical. Instead, I can do things digital. Excuse me one second. So check this out. If I have an asynchronous community, Discord for video gamers and millennials and Gen Zers, Slack, WhatsApp, Mighty Networks, other people can speak to that. If you want to text me, 484-324-8724, I can get into the nuances with you on that. But the goal here is you have an asynchronous community set up for discipleship. Now check this out. I can run my physical church service. And when people need to get discipled, sure, we can disciple them physically. Or, hey, why don't you also consider doing this online? And so this is where I think there's an opportunity to do both physically and digitally. Also adding to that, well, shoot, let's do a church in virtual reality. And if you're like a church service in virtual reality, Cornerstone VR is a great example of that. Physical church service, church in virtual reality. Hey, no problem. And by the way, disciples, both of them within their Discord. Or maybe it's been popular lately, a physical church that wants to do a micro church network. That's great. Empower people to do church services, and they can either be discipled within the micro church, in the location, the house church, or maybe you do discipleship centralized within the asynchronous community. You can start to see that, very strong church services, physical church services, virtual reality church services, micro church services, all of that can funnel into the same discipleship process. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Well, hey, look, if we're going to set up a centralized discipleship process, let's really allow imagination to kick in. Okay, hey, so you know what we're going to do? We're going to connect with a bunch of Twitch streamers that are Christians, that have influence and are looking to make a difference. And we're going to let them point to our asynchronous community. We're going to partner with them. And all of a sudden, we're going to have thousands of millennials who are getting exposed to the idea of digital discipleship. Or you know what? We're going to challenge family members to reach out to their other family members globally and invite them. Maybe they don't know Jesus. Maybe they know Jesus, but have been disconnected and burned. We're going to invite them into our asynchronous community for digital discipleship. We're going to challenge some TikTokers, some people in our church that know TikTok, and we're going to release them to reach people, but through TikTok, point to our asynchronous community for discipleship. We're going to release some people into the metaverse, into virtual reality. We want people literally walking around in shared experiences, connecting with people and sharing about Jesus. But instead of just letting those people be drive-by evangelism, let's try to funnel them into our asynchronous community for digital discipleship. Hey, we're going to do workplace ministries. And everybody who's working, let them connect with people. Maybe it's a lunch, maybe it's watching a Bible study video or something. But for further discipleship, let's partner with this asynchronous community and start to walk deeper into discipleship. And this is crazy. I put this on there because a friend of mine's actually doing it. Several are. Dungeons and Dragons Bible study. Hey, set up at a game shop, do a Bible study, play some Dungeons and Dragons. And by the way, point people to a community, get connected. And through the Bible study, through the community, people will find God. There's lots of different things you could do. And honestly, I would suggest anything you can imagine can be a front door when you have an asynchronous community in place for digital discipleship. That Dungeons and Dragons Bible study is not a bad front door when it feeds to something else. Empowering metaverse missionaries when your follow-up is attached to an asynchronous community is actually a win. TikTok church, you're not going to do TikTok. And actually, I take it back. I have seen somebody create a moderately successful ecclesiology on TikTok. It is very hard. But a TikTok front door that feeds into an asynchronous discipleship like this, why would you not do that? And so you're starting to see where missional imagination tied with an asynchronous community, man, God's given me a lot of vision. God's given me a lot of crazy ideas. In church, instead of telling those people no because it doesn't fit within your paradigm of a Sunday morning church service, maybe we should tell them yes. Maybe if we really want to get beyond 25 and start to connect with a different type of person, we need more TikTok churches. We need more Dungeons and Dragons Bible studies. We need more digital churches to reach creatives. That's another friend of mine's doing that. But there's no bad idea that feeds into a discipleship community. The step isn't is the idea effective, and it's almost how effective is it feeding into this asynchronous community that I'm describing. Hey, so this has been a great video, and I'm gonna wrap right here. If you've got questions, here's what I'm gonna do. I want you to join our online community. It's FAM. We've created an online community, Digital Church Network. Chesley Lundy also spoke um, at CITN. He on this idea as well, decentralized. And so we together we co-founded Digital Church Network, and I would love to invite you into the community. We've got 600-700 people, I think, at this point. People who are thinking outside the box, innovators, disruptors, people that want to see the gospel move, and that want to see different type of people reached. FAM.DIGITALCHURCH.NETWORk. Go there, create the account for free. Go and introduce yourself. Ask questions. The community loves questions, and honestly answers the questions typically before I do, and celebrates the wins typically before I can. And I've given you my cell phone number of times already, 484-324-8724. I would love to have a conversation with you, so feel free to reach out. Text. Who calls? I don't even think I'd answer a call. But you can text me, 484-324-8724. Set up a Zoom call or something like, if that helpful. But ask some questions. The idea of asynchronous community, whether you're an established church or starting a church from scratch, is a huge win. And to be effective not only today, but tomorrow, empowering those people, releasing those people that are in the pews to be on mission is the win. And it's not invite culture that's going to make the difference. You invite culture, you'll reach some people. But I promise you, different types of people are going to be reached by doing this decentralized idea and being more imaginative with our missional approaches. And so, hey, I'm going to land the plane. I hope this was helpful. Send me questions. If your church wants to talk, I would love to. 484-324-8724. But we're going to land the plane. My name's Jeff, and thank you for hanging out with me. Digital Church Network, the Church Digital Leadership Network, and New Thing, and more. It's all awesome stuff. Appreciate the time, and hope to see you around FAM or hear from you soon on the phone.